Okay.
Hello, most excellent English 8 students. I received calls from several of you families because Friday's assignment was very confusing to a lot of you. This week, our grammar assignment for Friday seemed to confuse many of you. So if you're one of the ones who called me, you are not alone. So I thought I would take a minute and kind of explain it, and maybe that would help. What it is the using correct case special problems. I don't know if you remember, it was dealing with when to use who and when to use whom. If you remember, at the very beginning of our introduction to pronouns, we were given a list of different kinds of pronouns. We were told there were personal pronouns and interrogative and demonstrative, and all the way down at the bottom was this little item called relative pronouns, and that is what we're dealing with in this lesson. It told us relative pronouns are used to introduce dependent clauses, and who and whom are the two that this lesson deals with, because it's tricky sometimes to know whether to use who or whom. So, I will try to explain it. The first sample sentence they gave us in the book said, Mr. Smith is the one who engineered our pay raise. And what we have here is a sentence. Our sentence has a subject and it has a verb. But inside our sentence we have a clause. And that's what makes these sentences so tricky. They all have clauses in them. Now a clause is a part of a sentence. It's going to have its own subject and its own verb, but it cannot stand alone as a sentence by itself. So, we are just going to work with the clause. And what we need to do is, we need to find out what job this is doing in the sentence. If we want to find out if we're going to use who or whom, well, that depends on what job it's doing in the sentence. In this sentence, the first thing you do is go find the verb. And in this sentence, engineered is the verb. And as you remember, to find a subject, you go to the verb and then ask who or what. So who or what engineered our pay raise? Well, the answer to that would be this person here. So this would be the subject. This is the person who engineered our pay raise. So since it's a subject, we would use who. Why? Well, if you remember from when we learned about personal pronouns, there were nominative case pronouns and objective case pronouns. And if you remember, the nominative ones are always the subject, or another word in the sentence that is the same person as the subject. And the objective case ones are always objects or complements. I'll get to that in a minute. So if you remember, our subject pronouns, he, she, we, they, you, and it, also include who. And our objective ones, him, her, us, them, you, and it, included whom. So since this is doing the job of a subject in the sentence, I would use who. Before I go on to the other ones are going to be objective. Perhaps we should take a minute to do a review on what objects are. These are all complements. What are complements?
You are very beautiful today, Miss Eckhart. That's a compliment.
No, not compliment with an I, Mr. Eckhart.
Oh.
Complement, something that complements or helps out or assists, right? Compliments, but thank you nonetheless. Compliments, you have a subject and a verb, and then you ask whom or what. For example, Bob, I like to use Bob in my sample sentences. Ursula will tell you. Bob gave. Bob is a subject, gave is a verb. And anytime you say subject, verb, and then ask the question whom or what, you have a complement. There are two kinds of complements. There's one for an action verb, and there's another kind for a linking verb. This is an action verb. The kind for an action verb is called a direct object. So if I said Bob gave what, and I picked a what, Bob gave Mary a cookie, cookie would be my direct object, because that's what Bob gave. The other kind is for linking verbs. This is an action verb. Do you remember the linking verbs? The forms of be, among others. Bob, let's pick a form of be. Bob is. Bob is what? Maybe Bob is the mailman. This is a complement. The name for complements of linking verbs are predicate nominatives. Predicate nominatives. These are complements.
Is Bob the mate man or Bob the mailman?
He's the mailman, Adam.
Oh. Okay.
Okay. So, subject, action verb, direct object. If we have a direct object, like cookie, a direct object follows an action verb. If we get to the direct object, and then we ask ourselves, to whom or to what, we have an indirect object. So if I said Bob gave cookie, and then I asked myself, gave cookie to whom? Gave cookie to Mary, I would have an indirect object, and I'm going to abbreviate it I-O because I've taken up all kinds of space that I didn't have. The indirect object is always going to come before the direct object in a sentence. It'll always be to the left of it, because if it were to the right, it would be in a prepositional phrase. If it were to the right of cookie, it would read, Bob gave a cookie to Mary. Now, to is a preposition, and Mary would be the object of a preposition, and it wouldn't be an indirect object anymore. So, to be an indirect object, it's always going to come before the direct object in a sentence. So, complements. If you have an action verb, your complements are the indirect object and the direct object. If you have a linking verb, your complement is called a predicate nominative. This makes sense because nominative means name. And what the predicate name does is it renames your subject. And it's in the predicate part of the sentence because everything from the verb on is the predicate. And to me, I think it makes sense that it renames the subject because think of what the forms of be are. They're state of being verbs. They're saying that Bob is being whatever this is, right? So of course it renamed him. You could switch them. The mailman is Bob. So this is important for us to understand this. Because if we're going to choose whom, we're going to choose it because it's going to be doing the job of an indirect object, a direct object, or the object of a preposition in the sentence. Because whom is objective, so if it's doing one of these jobs, we're going to use it. Who is nominative, so if it's doing the job of the subject, or another word in the sentence that means the subject, we're going to use this. Okay, so back to our sentences. Churchill was a man whom the people followed. In the whole sentence, the main subject and verb of the whole sentence is Churchill was. But we have a clause. This is a clause. It's a dependent clause because it can't be a sentence by itself. But it's going to have its own subject and verb. So, our job is to figure out what job these words are doing in this sentence. So in this clause, what is the subject? People. And in this clause, what is the verb? Followed. So this is not the subject of the sentence. That's a hint that we're not going to use who. Is this the same person as the subject? Are who and people the same in the sentence? Say no. No.
No, Mrs.
Okay.
Eckhart.
Thank you. Well, then obviously it's going to be objective. So you could just right there circle whom, but I'm going to take it a step further and tell you just exactly what job it is doing in this sentence. And in sentences like this, a lot of times with clauses, we're going to have to rearrange the order of the words to figure it out. People followed whom or what? This is the answer to that question. That makes this a direct object. People followed who? Whom? We could say the people followed whom. Now, we can test this because we know that whom is an objective case pronoun. If I want to test it to make sure I've chosen the right one, I could substitute one of these that I know are objective case, and if that makes sense, that tells me I'm right. Could I say the people followed him, or would I say the people followed he? I'd say him, so that tells me I'm on the right track. That is definitely objective. Okay, for this one, the girl whom they gave the award to was very appreciative. For the whole sentence, the subject and verb is they gave. But, no, that's not correct. That is not correct. Girl was appreciative. That's the subject and verb of the whole sentence. My clause is right here. There we go. So, inside my clause, what job is this doing in the sentence? And will I choose who or whom? The subject of my clause is they. The verb of my clause is gave. So, they gave what? They gave award. That makes this a direct object. So what is this then? Well, this is the object of the preposition to. Because, I know it's crazy, you have to rearrange it, and it's but think about it. They gave the award to whom? That's really what the clause is saying. So this is the object of the preposition to. So we would need whom. But if you don't want to figure that out, just ask yourself, is it the subject or is it a word that means the subject? And if it's not, don't go with who. It is not the subject because they is the subject. And these who and they do not mean the same person in the sentence. They are the givers of the award, not the receivers of the award, like she is. So it's not the same person. So you're not going to use this. You'd use this.